The Browns' schedule was released, and only a couple of primetime games on it, a Thursday night game, a Monday night game, and only one Sunday night game in the 4 o'clock late time slot. So not as high profile of a national presence as they had before. Let's take a look at the games as they line up. The Browns start on the road against the Ravens in week 1. Then they come back on short rest. Just 4 days later, they'll host the Bengals on Thursday, a home opener. So interesting thing there, Joe Burrow, only 4 days to prepare for that second game. Not much game planning going on there. Then you get the Redskins and Cowboys, some of the NFC teams in weeks 3 and 4. You flip over and you see the Colts in that 4:25 window. Then Steelers and Bengals back-to-back on the road. They host the Las Vegas Raiders in week 8. That's going to be tough to say. We move on to week 9, and the Browns have the bye in week 9. Then in week 10, they come back hosting a couple games at home, as they have the Texans and the Eagles at home. So those 3 weeks, if you include the bye, where they're home, chance to get healthy, no travel. Then they go on the road the weekend of Thanksgiving to face the Jaguars. They'll be in Tennessee playing the Titans in week 13. And then they come back and they finish it out reasonably with some winnable games. Monday night, a tough one. They host the Ravens in week 14. Back-to-back weeks in New York against the Giants and the Jets. And then they host the Steelers to wrap up the season at the stadium on January 3rd against Steelers. And who knows, maybe that'll be a playoff type thing. Time to welcome in Doug Lesmerises, cleveland.com columnist. Doug, as always, we appreciate the time. Last year you said 12 wins. You're half right. So I know I said 10, 11, so I was right there with you. You forgot, huh? You forgot. What are you thinking? You see that? What jumps to mind?
So I think one of the things that matters for the Browns is when you look back on last year's schedule, as it turned out, when they started 2-5, 5 of those teams in the first 7 games they played went to the playoff. We looked, for instance, you saw the Niners on the schedule a year ago. The Niners were the second worst team in the league the year before, and they turned out to be as good as they were. And they had a winnable game in the first month of the season at home against the Seahawks. Russell Wilson, leads a comeback. They dealt with Sean McVay, the little offensive genius, and the Rams lost. The first half of the season is more winnable. You looked at a year ago and you thought, man, if the Browns could have flipped a couple of these games. The Bengals were awful last year. The Browns didn't play them until the last month. So the Browns were already 5-7 before they got to play the Bengals. You see more winnable games early. They played both games against the Bengals in the first half of the season. They'll get Joe Burrow, as you said, on the short week. The Redskins in week 3, that's a winnable game. Vegas Raiders in there, winnable game. It just feels like a better opportunity sitting here now to get off to a decent start, because the schedule did just work against them a little bit, and it put them behind the 8 ball, and the pressure built, and there were obviously other problems. But I think the thing you take away from this is, you could see that just knowing the opponents they were going to have, it felt like they had a better shot with the schedule this year. But I do think the way it sets up, they have a better chance to get off to a good start and make those games in December matter.
How the opener against the Ravens in Baltimore, Browns are 8.5-point underdogs on it. They've already set the point spread. Caesars in Vegas has already set it. Browns 8.5-point underdogs. How important is it to at least not have what you had in week 1 a season ago against Tennessee, where it just kind of snowballed away from them? How important is that opener? I'm not saying that they have to win it, but they at least have to be competitive and feel good about the way they play.
So that's, they won that game last year at Baltimore as their best win last year. I mean, nobody beat Lamar. The Browns went in and beat Lamar, kind of as he was becoming Lamar. I almost think it's a perfect excuse, because say they do go on the road in week 1 and get their doors blown off. Lamar Jackson throws for 4 touchdowns, runs for 2 more, and the Ravens beat them 49-10, right? You will be able to say, well, It's the Ravens. They were 14-2 last year. Lamar Jackson is awesome. We're new with Kevin Stefanski. We'll take a mulligan. I think it's almost perfect because I don't think you have to. It would be great, right? Go beat Baltimore on the road. Great. But if you don't, I don't think you're going to be dragging around going into Thursday because you're going to say, man, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are going to do that to a lot of people. Now, at some point, if the Browns want to be their best, they got to beat the Ravens. They're going to win the division at some point in their, and they already did it, but like they can't do that forever, right? Say we'll accept losses to Baltimore. But when you look at this schedule, I think it's very possible of the 16 games, a loss at Baltimore is the most reasonable loss, right? So maybe on some ways it's tough to get that week one, but in other ways, nobody is going to come out of week one. They can lose by 60, and no one's going to say, well, season's over, because you're going to say, man, Baltimore's good. So I almost think, no, it's not must win because it's a built-in excuse, and then you bounce back and you have a very good shot against the Bengals and Redskins the next 2 weeks to get your feet under you and show really what kind of team you can be.
Is there any part of that schedule that you say, boy, this is the critical portion of it as you look at it? Is there an area where you say, they really need to have it together by this point in time? The other thing is they get Joe Burrow twice in the first, I think it's 7 weeks. So you got a guy that's still trying to get his NFL feet wet, and you get him early.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know that there is a critical point. Everyone's going to point towards that game in week 6 at Pittsburgh, right? We knew that, you get Big Ben back, Myles Garrett back on the field against the Steelers after what happened last year. They did play the Steelers after the Myles Garrett situation, but not with Myles. So that's going to be big. But I think it's very weird. It doesn't set up to me like there's huge winning streaks in this schedule or there's huge losing streaks in this schedule, right? I mean, you think last year, for instance, again, the Browns had a stretch in their 4th through 7th games. They played the Ravens, the 49ers, the Seahawks, and the Patriots. Those teams wound up winning 14, 13, 11, and 12 games last year. The Browns played them 4 straight games. What are you supposed to do with that? That's really hard. Like, I don't see that here. And, like, the easy part, I mean, it's kind of nice to have the Giants and the Jets like that back-to-back. It's a little weird to play in New Jersey back-to-back weeks. But they're going to be in a situation where if they're competitive late into the year, there are some wins to take on the board. I just think it's a very balanced, doable schedule that doesn't have lots of must-wins or super tough things. It's like, you know what? If you kind of just go out and play pretty good football, I don't think the schedule is going to work for you or against you. And compared to sort of how it worked last year, I think the Browns would take that.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree. It isn't, when you look at this schedule based on what they had last year, you look at it and go, boy, they kind of caught a break. I mean, now nobody, as you pointed out, nobody knew the 49ers were going to be the team that they ended up being. And there's probably a team on their schedule who will outperform what everybody thinks they're going to do. But by and large, there isn't the thing where you're like, oh, we got to go here and play, other than the arguably the toughest games they're going to see are the ones in the AFC North, in their division.
Yeah, and again, I just think and Cincinnati will be probably better than 2-14, but again, it's still a young quarterback. Joe Burrow is not going to set the world on fire as a rookie. I mean, I think he's going to end up being a really good quarterback. But it's nice to get those Bengals games early when they still matter more, right? Because, again, you can balance it the other way. Okay, well, if you're in the playoff race, then maybe it's nice to have them late because they're sitting there. But, again, they sort of, when you looked at the Browns' schedule last year with Arizona and 2 Cincinnati games late, it's like, man, they looked like winnable games. But by the time they got to those games, they were already kind of a mess, and it almost didn't matter. So, I just think, it's like that Dallas game, week 4 is big, right? So it's like you have Dallas, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh in a row. But that's not the same as Baltimore, San Francisco, Seattle, New England. I mean, again, and you look at the quarterbacks, just guys like that Russell Wilson game just stands out to me so much last year. The Browns played well. It was right there. And then they got Russell Wilson, at home. And like, that's what Russell Wilson does. He does that to everybody. That was a killer game. And then you come back, you get a bye week, you come back after that, and you get Tom Brady on the road. Like, there's just not combos like that. They got Deshaun Watson and Carson Wentz back to back, but as good as Deshaun Watson and Carson Wentz are, they're not Russell Wilson and Tom Brady.